they were hit-and-run raiders about here. Now the Americans had been learning this, but still, when you got out here in the Eastern Theater, particularly at this time, the Indians were still the teacher, the frontier people were still the pupil. Anytime they could get these settlers out into an open area, they were probably going to win. And again, when you think about the Indian as a warrior, male had two primary occupations. He was a hunter and he was a warrior. He was a master woodsman, incidental to both of them. In contrast, the people who first settled here were anything but. They were mostly farmers, but they were, of course, blacksmiths, wheelwrights, and any of 100 other frontier occupations that existed at that time. And they came together as militia. But again, militia by definition are part.
Well, hello and welcome inside the labyrinth. This is the Fort Henry Days edition, and I am very happy to have our very first guest here for this particular series. And would you introduce yourself and state the area of history that you specialize in?
My name's Joe Roxby, and the area of history that I specialize in is the local history here, basically from the opening of Wheeling, 1769, through the close of the Indian Wars in 1794.
Cool. And what is your first recollection of when you became interested in history in general or in your area of?
I suppose basically fiction excited my interest in that. I probably read Zane Grey's Spirit of the Border once too many times.
Cool, nice. And would you say there was a specific historical figure or somebody that you find inspiring or inspires you to do what it is you do?
Several years ago, when I still did this, when I was a competitive shooter, there was a magazine called Precision Shooting.
Okay.
And it was a higher end magazine in the sense that it was written to higher technical and literary standards of what you find on the newsstands. And it had its own cult-like following among the competition shooters.
Okay.
And the editor basically had a little chapter in there about the last resting places of famous riflemen.
Right.
And there would be a grave, and they would have accompanied by a short biography. I asked them if it would like Louis Wetzel was considered probably by most the deadliest combat rifleman of the age. And I asked him if he would like to have a photo of the grave and a short bio, and he said yes.
Okay.
Well, I had to scramble to make connections to, first thing I wanted to do was hunt down who was the resident expert on Louis Wetzel, and I did. And one thing led, anyway, even before the piece was published, the editor asked me to do a long chapter for their annual publication, which I did, and after that, the rest is history, as they say.
Nice. And what would you say is the biggest misconception that people have of history? Because there's a lot out there that I think people don't really get, or there's a lot of historical myths floating around out there that people believe as truth, and really it's not. But then when you try to tell them that no, that's a myth, they get a little bit defensive. So, what would you say might be the biggest misconception that people might have?
I would say the worst thing they can do about any of this, it is just plain wrong to sit there 200 years removed from the scene and judge what these people did by today's standards.
Yeah.
That was without a doubt the worst thing you can do.
Yes.
I mean, as I've gone along and right, obviously we went back and we worked hard to develop primary sources and things like that. Of course, living here, and I'm a lifelong Wheeling resident, I have the advantage in the sense that I can go back and walk the crime scenes as much as I like. And many times, as they say, geography is history. When you look at the lay of the land, it will tell you how things happened and why they developed the way they did, and I have that.
Yeah, and no, but I do agree that you can't really judge people 200 years ago by today's standards, and
absolutely, even what people conceived of as murder in those days was different than what we think of today.
And
it's just different conceptions, different time.
Yeah, absolutely. They had a completely different atmosphere back then, and
well, I think England had something like 166 laws on the books, all called for the death penalty. Of course, I think drawing and quartering was still legal.
Yeah.
So, but again, it was this area was the scene of very savage fighting. And again, it was irregular warfare. It was guerrilla warfare, and there were not a lot of regular troops marching around in this area. It was militia bands versus bands of Indians. And depending on who was on offense and who was on defense, there were a lot of atrocities committed on both sides. It's just simply how people fought wars in those days. The Indians were a primitive people, obviously. And one of the things that actually translate, much like the folks in the Middle East, they had a corporate sense of vengeance, in the sense that if you had murdered someone in my family, I couldn't, where typically Western justice would want to seek you out and punish you. Their sense of it was they would, if they couldn't get you, they would take a member of your family or someone else what they would consider as a member of your tribe, and they may or may not be.
Oh, okay, yeah, that's pretty cool then. So, yeah. So basically, what? First of all, where can people find you on the internet? Do you have a website or?
Actually, I do. It's JoeRoxby.com.
JoeRoxby.com. Cool.
I've got some historical pieces. I also am an Ohio County magistrate, so it's.
Okay, and lastly, what do you think could get people maybe interested in looking more into history? Because, as you know, we discussed earlier, there's a lot of misconceptions that people have, and people tend to think of it as just very dry and boring or just horrible, and they want nothing to do with it. So how would you maybe go about hopefully changing somebody's mind like that?
Well, anyone who's, how do I say it, simply interested in a good story, this needs no embellishment. What these people did in the lives they lived, were so fascinating, the characters so compelling, whether it was Louis Wetzel or Betty Zane, or one Alan Eckert brought to life in his book Dark and Bloody River, was a man, we said this time was built on a trilogy of local legends. There was the fourth one that should be included in that. His name was Sam Brady. And I'm actually working on adding a new chapter in a book on him.
Oh, nice. Very cool. And when is that book going to be out?
Actually, it already is. It's been out it's been out for 20 years. My partner and I wrote it just over the years. Every couple of years when we did it, we'd add another couple of chapters. It grew as it came along. The way it started out, he and I had both done enough articles for precision shooting on this area. It's like one day we're sitting there, and I said, Bill, we should put our stuff together. We've got enough for a book.
Yeah.
And what it is, it's called The Heroic Age, Tales of Wheeling's Frontier Era. And I would recommend it. It's a good, quick, and dirty read in the sense that it will get you up to speed as to what happened quickly without wading all through the long-haired historical sources and things like that. It's I would like to think well-researched and well-written.
Oh, very cool. Yeah.
And it's the nice thing about it, the book is episodic in the sense that each chapter, they relate to each other, but each chapter is a complete story.
Right. Oh, nice. Very cool. That sounds awesome. And people can get it at your website?
Actually, right now, the only place I think I've had it out of print just because I'm redoing it. I think the only place that has some copies left is Valley Cheese in Wheeling.
All right. Well, sounds good then.
Down at the Center Market. Okay,
cool. Awesome. Well, thank you very much. Thank you. It was very, very nice having you on. Definitely. So.
Well, we appreciate anything you do. This, like I said, this is a fascinating area, and we're happy to have you out spreading the word in your blog.
Yes, thank you very much, and enjoy the rest of Fort Henry days. And yes, we'll see you all later. I'll be back with another interview, and have a lovely day.
His oldest son, literally was within yards of the gate. And safety, and he gets there, and his father from the wall sees him get tomahawked right in front of him. And that's not the first tragedy that would befall the Shepherd family to this day. He's tomahawked, and now the Indians are rushing the fort. And amazingly enough, there were people who had taken their time, who had lived outside along the hillside over there, and had some cabins and things like that. There are people who had seen this, and they actually, when they finally hear the firing going on, they grab their things and begin to run. There's actually one account that states a woman was so excited she grabbed all her belongings and ran in and forgot her infant child. I can only think of, have you ever seen the movie Home Alone where they leave the kid? That made me think of that. Anyway, that story ends happily. She realizes what she's done and retrieves the child and gets it back to